Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Gretchen, and today I'm back with another International Booker Longlist review, and today's book is Undiscovered by Gabriela Wiener, and this is translated from the Spanish by Julia Sanchez. Now, this book, I will be perfectly honest up front and say that this is not my favorite book, and I was really not a fan of it. And there are several reasons, and we'll kind of get into all of them. But what I will say is I had really high hopes for this based on reading the blurb and the summary of what this book was about, but sadly what was promised was just not delivered in the end. And I think that my biggest complaint about this book was that it just seemed fragmented, it seemed random and thrown together at times, it was just not cohesive at all. And I think that if a little more time were spent on this book in making sure that it flowed well together between the different types of things that were going on, which we'll talk about, I think that I could have appreciated this book more. I'm not saying I would have enjoyed this book, because there are some fundamental problems with it that I would just not gel with in general, but I think that one of the big reasons why I didn't like it is it did just seem thrown together, and it didn't have that cohesiveness that I was looking for. If that had been repaired prior to publishing, I would have got along better with the book. For starters, what is this book about and what can you expect from it? So the book starts with our main character, and I will say that this is a piece of autofiction. So going into this, know that it is autofiction. So everything that you are reading as a reader, I was constantly wondering, okay, is this real? Is this fake? Is this made up? Is this a real thing that happened to her? So I was kind of confused going along with this book as well, and kind of questioning a lot of the things that were happening, trying to fit it into, okay, is this the nonfiction side? Is this the fiction side? So that part of the book was confusing for me. But basically, this book starts out with Gabriela, and she is at a museum in Paris, and she is looking at an exhibit that contains artifacts from Peru. And what we very quickly learn is that those artifacts were found, discovered, and basically stolen from the Peruvians by her great-great-grandfather. And we then start to learn about that story, about how he left Europe and he went to Peru, and he was on a search for Machu Picchu, and he never found it, but along the way he did discover all of these artifacts along the way. He also, while he was there, ended up meeting a woman and having a child with that woman, and basically that is the start of her descendant story. And we spend a good bit of the first part of the book talking about all of that, and her coming to terms with being a descendant of a white man that stole pieces of her native country's history and all of those things. That part of the book I found extremely fascinating. Anytime there is a book about colonialism or the plight of the people, where privileged white men come in and start taking everything as their own, and their history and how they process that I'm very interested in. And my sympathies are always, of course, with, the natives that have these horrific things that are happening to them, and their histories being stolen. So I was actually very sympathetic with the narrator at the beginning of the story, because, her having a white great-great-grandfather and her living in Peru, knowing that her bloodline is a part of this form of colonialization, and her having to deal with that. I was very sympathetic to her during that story. But then all of a sudden, the book turns from being about a subject that I really was empathetic toward, to her talking about her being in a polyamorous relationship, and one of the partners in that relationship is white, and how she is dealing with that. And we also talk about her infidelity and how her relationship, this polyamorous relationship, starts to crumble because of conscious decisions that she made, almost these self-sabotaging decisions that she made. And we talk about her need to be in that polyamorous relationship. We learn about her loneliness, and we learn about how even though she is in this polyamorous relationship, she still feels extremely alone and isolated, and she's just trying to find her place in the world. And it was just so all over the place, and it just didn't seem to line up or match with the first part of the book. And I'm not saying that I have anything against her decision to be polyamorous. It's just not what I signed up for in the book, and it was just very off-putting and very jarring to me. Although that was mentioned in the blurb, I just didn't expect the book to focus so heavily on that. And what I really became frustrated with was, she almost to me, it almost seemed like she was looking for empathy from the reader, and she wanted her actions to be justified. She wanted the reader to empathize with her, and she wanted the reader to understand better why she was feeling the way she did, what led her to her infidelity and those decisions. And the more and more that I read it, I just realized that I did not like this main character at all. She was so unlikable to me, and the more that I read it, knowing that it was autofiction, the more and more I started to question, like, I don't like how this book is making me feel toward the author. I couldn't see the lines between nonfiction and fiction, and what parts of this story were actually the author herself, or what parts of her story she chose to make up. And it was just very difficult for me to process all that was happening in the book. And I think that this book definitely had moments of genius in it. There were some sections of this and parts of her writing which were gorgeous, and she said things that were so profound, and I found myself stopping what I was doing or reading and just absorbing that and taking some of that in. And then the next thing I knew, she was just peddling for sympathy again. And I just didn't appreciate any parts of that. If she would have approached that part of the story with a more self-aware lens for the narrator or the main character, I would have appreciated it so much more. To me, seemed like she was placing a lot of the blame for her actions on a lot of things that have happened as part of her past, and I just couldn't. And I felt so bad because I wanted to like this book. I really enjoyed that first part, and I was so hoping that that narrative that started at the beginning would continue and we would dig more deeply into those parts of the story. And then it just totally ended up being something that I was not prepared for and that I was just not really gelling with. And like I said, I feel like the second part, where we really started to get into a lot of that relationship stuff, if it was presented in a more self-aware, self-effacing, tail between her legs kind of narrative, where she was understanding what mistakes she has made and owning up to them, I feel like I would have processed it so much more. But it just seemed like she was peddling for my sympathy and she wanted my approval for her bad behavior, and I just didn't like it. And I know that that could just be my opinion. I could have totally missed the plot on why so much of this stuff was brought up during the second half. I feel like she really did have a lot of interesting things that she was trying to say. She just never quite figured out how to meld those two parts of the story together in a way that worked. And like I said, at the end of the day, instead of me feeling, sympathetic towards her plight and the plight of her people and all of the things that her great-great-grandfather did, like, I would have been just fine. But yeah. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, this is my fourth book into the Booker Longlist, and I'm already almost done with a fifth, and I have yet to be wowed. Like, I really enjoyed Not a River. I really enjoyed the details, and those are my shining star books at the moment, but I'm not gelling with this long list like I usually do. And I'm hoping that maybe I saved the better books for the second half, but I'm starting to get scared, guys. This isn't going very well. I expect so much more from the Booker prizes, and so far it is not delivering what I was expecting. But this prize isn't about me. I could, like I said, be completely missing the plot on a lot of these books, but sadly, I gave this book a 2.5 stars. I don't usually rate books that low. I really have to dislike the book to do so, and this was just a book that I can't get behind. If it was written differently, I appreciate the themes, I appreciate all of that, but the execution for me was just non-existent, and sadly, because of that, I have to give it a low score. So I'm really curious to see, maybe some of you that enjoyed this book can convince me or show me that I did lose the plot and I totally came at this from the wrong angle. Please let me know, because I wanted to like this book. I really did, but I just couldn't. So please prove me wrong. I am waiting for that in the comments if you have read this. Or if you felt the same way, let me know that too, because sometimes when we don't don't like these books and we think that it's a book we're supposed to like, sometimes we need that validation when it turns out to be a book that we don't end up getting along with. So regardless, let me know what your thoughts on this book are in the comments, and wish me luck on my next books. I'm hoping that I get a 5-star or at least a 4.5 out of this long list, but I guess time will tell. And until we read again, bye.